Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do a little language workout, all about sharpening your precision in English. We're going to dig into those subtle but really crucial differences between words that are super easy to mix up. Think of it like adding some new high-powered tools to your communication toolkit. Ready? Let's get started.
Okay, let's just jump right in with our first trio: crack, crash, and clash. Now, all three of these words suggest some kind of impact, right? But you definitely can't swap them out. For example, your phone screen might crack. You know, that awful moment when you see a line appear on the surface, but it's still basically in one piece. Cars, on the other hand, they crash. That's a much more violent, noisy collision, usually with a lot of damage. And then there's clash. This one's a bit different. It's for when personalities or even ideas just don't get along. They conflict.
All right, so let's get into our first section, the physical world. We're going to be looking at words that describe actions and objects, all the tangible stuff around us. And you'll see how picking just the right word can paint a much, much clearer picture.
Okay, first up, and this one is really important. It's all about context, especially when we talk about people. The word defective, you use this for a faulty or imperfect object. Think of a defective product you have to take back to the store. It's for things, never for people. When you're referring to a person, the correct and respectful term is intellectually disabled. And you know, this isn't just a vocabulary lesson, it's really about communicating with kindness and respect.
Next up, we have the word depart. Now, this is basically a more formal way of saying leave. You're going to hear this one a lot in travel situations, like at an airport or a train station. So the action, the verb, is to depart, and the noun is departure. You might, for instance, check the departure time on your plane ticket, or hear that familiar announcement: the train will now depart from platform 9.
All right, here's a great little group of phrasal verbs. They all have to do with moving away, but the reason why is different for each one. So first, to escape. This means to break free from somewhere you're being held, like escaping from a prison. Then you've got run away. This usually implies leaving a bad situation, like a teenager running away from home. Now, getaway is the fun one. It has a really positive feel, like when you get away for a weekend vacation. And finally, keep away. This is more of a command, a warning to maintain your distance, like keep away from the edge.
Now, this next group of words is really interesting because they're all connected by this idea of loss and purpose. Take sacrifice. That's when you give up something really valuable for a cause you believe is more important. And speaking of causes, you might devote your time and energy to that cause. Now, the one who suffers that loss could be called a victim, or if we're talking about the animal kingdom, prey. See how they all link together? It's about giving something up, often for a very specific reason. You know, English has a ton of specific words for people who sell things. It's not just seller. For example, a merchant is kind of a general term for someone who buys and sells goods to make a profit. A vendor, you'd probably picture them selling things on the street or at an outdoor market. A trader is more specialized, dealing in specific goods. Think of a stock trader. A dealer usually focuses on one kind of high-value item, like a car dealer. And a shopkeeper is exactly what it sounds like, someone who runs a small shop.
Okay, let's look at 3 ways to talk about moving away from being straight up and down. So you might lean against a wall for support. A road that goes uphill is on an incline. And you might tilt your head to the side when you're curious about something. And notice those little prepositions. They're so important. You lean against something and you tilt your head to the side. Each word describes an angle, but the context is totally different.
All right, the word bump. Super simple, right? It just means a light, sudden collision. You know, like when you accidentally bump your knee on the corner of a table. Ouch! But it also has this really common social meaning. The phrasal verb to bump into someone means you meet them completely by chance. So it's funny, you can physically bump a table, but you can also socially bump into an old friend at the grocery store.
Oh, this is a perfect example of why context is everything. Swell, inflate, and bulge. They all mean to get bigger, but they paint totally different mental pictures, don't they? So an injury, like a sprained ankle, might swell. You have to use a pump to inflate a balloon or a tire. And if your pocket is stuffed with keys and a phone, it's going to bulge. The word you pick tells us exactly how and why something expanded. Okay, let's head out to sea for a minute with some words about water travel. So, to sail is the act of traveling on water, especially with wind power. And the person doing that is a sailor. But the sailor has to navigate. That's the actual skill of figuring out where to go and how to get there. And then you have to float, which is just the basic state of being on top of the water and not sinking. So you can see each word is a different piece of the whole voyage.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about the physical world, but for this next part, we're moving into the world of ideas. We're going to explore words that help us talk about more abstract things, like concepts, feelings, and how people relate to each other.
So you have these three words: partly, partially, and somewhat. At their core, they all just mean not completely. They're often interchangeable. You could say a report is partly finished or partially finished, and it means the exact same thing. Somewhat is a little different, though. We often use it to kind of soften what we're saying. For instance, instead of "I was surprised," you could say "I was somewhat surprised," which sounds a little less intense.
Okay, let's say you're about to start a really big, challenging project. Instead of just saying you're going to start it, you could use undertake or take on. These words have more weight to them. They sound more formal and serious. For example, you might undertake a huge new study, or you could take on a new leadership role at your job. Both of them really imply that you're making a serious commitment.
Here are two really fundamental ways of thinking about problems. First, you've got cause and effect. This is all about a direct, predictable link. If I do this, then that will happen. It's scientific. On the other hand, you have trial and error. This is totally different. It's a process of discovery where you just try a bunch of different things, see what fails, and keep trying until something finally works. So one is about prediction, and the other is all about exploration.
This is a big one, the idea of being alone. There are a few ways to talk about it, and the emotional feeling is completely different for each. So, solo and solitary usually imply it's a choice. You take a solo trip because you want to. You go for a solitary walk in the woods, and it's peaceful. But lonely, that's a negative feeling. It's the sadness that comes from feeling isolated, whether you're physically alone or not. It's a great reminder that you can be solitary and feel perfectly happy, but lonely is a whole different ballgame.
All right, three powerful words for when groups join forces. First, solidarity. This is all about showing support and unity with a group, especially a group that's going through a tough time. Then there's alliance. This is more formal, like an official agreement between two countries to help each other out. And finally, a union. This is about taking separate things and joining them into a single, stronger whole, like a labor union that brings all the workers together.
Okay, let's dig into the idea of needing support from someone or something. You rely on a person you can count on, and that's usually built on having trust in them. Now, the word dependency also means you need something, but it usually has a negative vibe, suggesting an unhealthy need. For instance, a dependency on a substance. The prepositions here are really key. You rely on someone, you have trust in them, and you might have a dependency on something.
Here are a few great phrases that all have to do with something being close. It could be close in time or close in space. So, an upcoming holiday is one that's happening soon. A nearby coffee shop is close to you physically. And then there's the fantastic idiom just around the corner, which can actually mean both. You can say that summer is just around the corner, or that the post office is just around the corner.
Let's talk about the obsess family. This is all about having a really intense, maybe even unhealthy, constant focus on something. The verb is to obsess, and the noun is an obsession. Now, the most important thing to remember here are the prepositions, because they change. We tend to obsess over a problem we can't solve, but we are obsessed with a new hobby or a favorite celebrity.
This one's pretty straightforward, but really useful, especially if you're talking about business or shopping. To underprice something means you're selling it for way less than it's actually worth. And the opposite, of course, is to overprice it, charging way more than its true value. It's all about that relationship between price and value.
Okay, think of this as a sliding scale of economic trouble, going from bad to really, really bad. So first, you might have a downturn. That's just a general slowdown in the economy. If things get worse, it becomes a recession, which is a much more significant, prolonged decline. And at the very end of the scale is a collapse, a total, catastrophic failure of the system. Each word signals a completely different level of seriousness.
So, there we have it. We've gone through a lot of these little nuances in the English language. And the best way to think about this isn't as a bunch of rules you have to memorize. Instead, picture each one as a new, specialized tool that you've just added to your communication toolkit. You're now equipped to be more precise.
You know, the only way to really make these words stick is to start using them. So I have a little challenge for you. What's one new word or phrase from today that you're going to try to use in a conversation? Just pick one. It's the absolute best way to start making it a natural part of your vocabulary. Thanks so much for joining me.